Welcome to Queen of the Ring, the podcast that wants to talk to you all about wrestling. My name is Alexa. Today, I'm going to be bringing you the third and final part of our series on AJ Mendez's book, Crazy Is My Superpower, How I Triumphed by Breaking Bones, Breaking Hearts, and Breaking the Rules. The last couple of parts was AJ taking us through her early life as a child, her relationship with her parents and her siblings, and her relationship with her mental illness that she suffers from and deals with every day. We got a little bit into wrestling school, but this is where we're really going to be taking off this part of her career, and it's very exciting, and I hope you will listen and enjoy. I want to provide a quick content warning for talking about food and eating, body talk, sexual harassment, self-harm, and discussions about mental illness because, the last part of this series was taking a look at the way mental illness affected AJ's family, the way it can take a hold of everyone. And where we find AJ at this moment is, as she has said, she's sticking through the highs and lows of trying to control her highs and lows, which I just think is a really nice way to put that process. And one of her very highest highs right now is wrestling school in this book. The training process lasted for about a year until she began embarking on the independent circuit, which is, these small wrestling promotions that exist outside of televised wrestling that many people see across the nation. AJ traveled through bingo halls, county fairs, and more, attempting to gather the skills that she needed to be a successful professional wrestler. It was around 2007, 2008 when AJ was going through this journey, and she was realizing just how little women there were at all at these promotions she was going through. It made finding opponents for her incredibly difficult, and it made her kind of have less opportunities at these jobs in whole. And even when they would find women, the promoters would be really nervous about how small AJ was, and she was made to prove herself and prove her grit every single time she went out there. And she says that the most money she made at these things was possibly $40, but she felt the satisfaction of someone doing what they love. So it wasn't a difficult choice to continue on. She felt like she was meant to be exactly where she was. And even when she was made to perform in 20-degree Fahrenheit theaters in front of a crowd as small as 10, she still felt right. In 2008, one of AJ's friends at wrestling school said they had heard the WWE was holding open tryouts, but they kind of thought it would be a scam because it was $2,000 to hold your spot in the tryouts, and you still had to get there on your own and pay for your own stay, which sounds pretty fucking scammy to me. But when they found out more, they heard it's like this annual WWE thing that they would hold in Tampa, Florida, where producers, writers, executives of the like would gather with trainers, wrestlers, and other talent coordinators to hold open auditions. AJ was very aware she did not have the money for that at the moment, and she said if she did, she would have been, quote, making it rain on her sister while she slept. But she wasn't discouraged. She paid attention to the one part of that she could maybe have some control in. It was annual. She was determined to begin saving her money as much as humanly possible so she could get in front of these people. AJ was very determined now. She needed to find a better job. Currently, she was working as an assistant for, quote, pervy misogynists at a calling card company, unquote, who would snap at her to get her attention, like, snap. Ew. And she would sometimes found her boss watching porn. Ooh, not great. And after all of this became much too much, and she couldn't wash the day off of her when she got home. She just had to move on. And when she did quit there, she immediately started searching for new jobs. She said, quote, "No, I wasn't qualified for much. I borrowed my sister's clothes, typed up a malnourished resume using a very big font, and went on interview after interview." She finally got a job as a receptionist at a day spa in Hoboken on the Hudson River, and she was paid much better than she had at her last. Over her weekends, she would travel the tri-state area for wrestling shows. And as that year went by and came up again, the annual tryout was happening. And she had been scrimping and saving her money and kind of just having her sister help her with her portion of the rent when she could, because she really needed to do this. And although they really had no money for essentials like food and bus fare, AJ did save the money. And at the same time as the audition, AJ got some opportunities within the independent wrestling circuit, and she vetoed those chances for real money to go to this Tampa-based WWE tryout. And she said directly after she got off the plane in Tampa, her hair grew 3 sizes like the Grinch's heart. The humid air reminded her of her childhood time in Puerto Rico, and the heaviness the air held felt like a warm blanket surrounding her, providing her with a comfort leading into a place of nothing but the unknown. The first day of the tryout consisted of over 70 wrestlers in a big warehouse, and only 3 of others were women. And by the looks of these 3 other women, AJ was a little bit concerned about what kind of chances she had. During the middle of running the ropes, back and forth, after everyone was split amongst the 3 separate wrestling rings in the room, Tom Pritchard approached AJ and told her that they wanted her to cut a promo in the other room and to follow him. They wanted her to show them her acting chops. She says she was not prepared for that yet because it was the first day, and apparently on the schedule, the promos were scheduled for Friday, and she was like freaking out as she was walking into this room full of higher-ups in the company, and she was blank, holding a microphone. She had been going through the indie circuit as a babyface, a hero. She had been attempting to curate this into a convincing, heroic character that she could bring into the wrestling ring with herself. But just as she convinced herself that she was fucked because she was still blank, she out of nowhere began to deliver a nasty monologue as a heel. She spit insults at everyone in her path and boasted herself over any other person. She said, quote, "It was nice to find out that my flight or fright instinct was to be a total dick." But she must not know that the other way people say that is flight, fight, or freeze. So she's a fighter, which makes sense. She said, quote, "Whatever nonsense came out of my mouth was ridiculous and off the cuff." She faked it until she made it, which, goodness, I just feel like everyone says, and maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe I should try. Cute personal discovery. Mid-episode. For the next couple of days at the camp, she was finding unprecedented confidence within herself. Going through the next trials and challenges they laid out for her, she really maintained this bubble of confidence. She brings up a lot how much she had to cut back on eating to save up money for this opportunity. She lost almost 15 pounds leading up to it, which is horribly sad and, among other things, is an indictment on this fucking country. AJ has struggled, her family and herself, with food insecurity for her entire life, and she's far from the only person, the only family to be in these situations. And, I say this all because it's just fucking sad. But also, while she was in tryouts, someone from the main roster was there, and they told her, "Honestly, you're way too skinny. You look fragile, like something that could break." And it really shook the confidence that she had been building, and she kind of came back down to earth and remembered the other women around her and just kind of was like, fuck. At the end of the week, she and the other 70 hopefuls had heard rumors that there would be an actual signing coming up, and they had chosen one person for now, but there would be announcements for a few others in the coming weeks. About the feeling in the room, she said, quote, "Tensions were high, nails were bitten. I crossed my legs in my chair and stared at the floor. I knew there was no way that my name would be called that day. I was at peace with that realization and excited to see which one of the guys would get the chance of a lifetime." And they were all just kind of forced to marinate there for a while, marinate in their nervousness. But, quote, "Ty Bailey stood in front of the shaking sea of muscles and self-tanner and thanked everyone for participating. He made some sort of moving speech, but all I heard was white noise until I saw everyone turn to look at me." Confused, she realized that he had said her name to win the contract. There was an outpour of congratulations coming out of nowhere at her, and she started to cry, an honest to God grateful cry, when Ty handed her a contract. She was so full of emotion. She said, quote, "I looked at the card in my hand and realized it was a business card on which Ty had scribbled, 'Contract with WWE.' It was hilariously unofficial, but only enhanced the absurdity of the moment." Which I think is I think that's a really great written part. I'm going to post a picture of the contract because she had it in her book, and it is really funny that it's all so official, but she gets this silly thing that just says, "You got it, girl." Everyone around her was so genuinely happy for her. They were warm and supportive, and there was just so much coming. When she finally got her own moment alone, the first phone call she made was to her brother Ravi. She said, quote, "Remember that promise I made to you when we were 12? So because of all of this, she moved to Florida. And she describes how she only had this like aqua colored quilt as furniture for a very long time, and that's where she would watch her DVDs of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. She was now training at Florida Championship Wrestling, FCW, which is the developmental division of WWE. She makes a point of saying how she spent too much money moving and really didn't have any stuff. So she couldn't buy any furniture or anything. But it's like, AJ, come on, girl. The thrift stores have good couches and they're cheap. But whatever, I believe her. She just said she didn't have a bed. And I'm like, oh no, because her body is her way of gaining capital, but she can't afford to care for it. Which I once again think is an indictment on this fucking country, of course. As she was really beginning this journey, she emphasizes that it is really important to her to visualize her future, and she actionizes that through writing a list of her 10-year plan. The list is from win the championship, adopt more dogs, to be in a video game. She says, quote, "My dreams were the hot girl in high school, and I was going to convince them to go to prom with me, maybe get them pregnant so they were stuck with me forever." She knew it was going to be fucking difficult, though. The people around her in the developmental program were, who she had to wrestle, depend on, to be there and to compete with. And she says it was hard for the whole group of them because it's really hard to predict what the producers and the agents and writers want. Because sometimes it was the person that was the most polished, the most experienced, and had the best overall wrestling skill. But sometimes they picked the people who weren't experienced at all and weren't specifically ready, but had whatever the fuck they needed. So there was no direct formula to follow. So it made succeeding in this environment really difficult for her and everyone else there. This all became very clear to AJ, as, quote, "Some of the wrestlers experienced the rejection several times, totaling anywhere from 2 to 5 years within the developmental system. Suddenly, I realized why everyone seemed tired and dejected and not nearly as naive and bright-eyed as I'd entered." She tells us how her training in New Jersey was nothing compared to the work she was doing in FCW, which was, quote, not a place you could pop in for 2 hours, have a practice match, and call it a day. We had to eat, breathe, sleep, and bleed training, and I bled a lot. And while she was eating, sleeping, breathing, and bleeding wrestling, our Miss Mendez was now known in the WWE as AJ Lee. Wrestlers usually don't use their own names because the WWE likes to have a copyright on the name of the performer. You literally can't even own your own name. But AJ chose AJ since that's what her family always called her, and she felt comfortable there. And she chose Lee after a voice actress, Wendy Lee, from her favorite anime, Cowboy Bebop. Apparently, Creative at first rejected AJ as a name because they thought it was too tomboyish. But they came up with literally nothing better, so when it was really down to the wire, AJ got to sneak the name in before anyone noticed. Living nearby the warehouse where they would train, AJ would walk there to start training at like 8 a.m. every day. The group of trainees were split into groups, and they were made to run drills. And because there wasn't very many women training there at all, they all had to train with the guys, which is how a lot of, women get started in wrestling with intergender training. She says, quote, in training, it was essential to learn how to adjust in a moment's notice and communicate without letting the audience know. Afterwards, they would practice their promos and they would study matches, which just sounds really fun, to be honest. They would do live shows 3 times a week at different spots around Florida. Weeks that they wouldn't be doing any shows, their days would usually end at 5, but AJ would stay around till around 8 o'clock to practice even more. After a while of doing that, 2 people started showing up to stay late with her, one of them being Trinity Fatu, also known as the Incredible Naomi. And around to give them a hand would either be Tom Pritchard, Norman Smiley, or Billy Kidman, who AJ said, quote, had the patience of the saints and an apparent death wish. And she said that the teachers just really wanted to see them succeed, and that was all. The death wish part ain't no fucking lie because AJ was getting hurt. She suffered 3 concussions, dislocated her elbow, both kneecaps, and after smashing her face into another person's, her tooth ripped a hole through her lip. But in the eyes of the people training her, she was really excelling, and as time went on, she quickly became no longer a rookie. Her body was changing, and she was putting on more and more and more muscle. She was starting to really prove herself also. For the next 5 years, AJ remained there and quickly became the person that people would look to see who was doing good, who needed extra help. Almost every woman that came in that company during that time had their first tryout with AJ. She said, quote, as much as I loved being trusted with that responsibility, I was essentially putting my body on the line in situations where I would never see most of these women again. She was being used as a utility man, as they refer to it in wrestling, and she says she was like old reliable. But that meant that she never got the fuck out of there. And any time she was brought on the road, she was quickly sent back. And it was kind of tearing down her confidence. And she was obviously still maneuvering through her bipolar disorder, maintaining it, but, sometimes was feeling a little bit down because of all of it. Part of the downness she was feeling, she thought, was maybe loneliness, or that she kind of missed taking care of someone. So to remedy that, she went and adopted an old, scared chihuahua that she christened Nacho Cheese Mendez. Adopting and caring for animals is very important to her. As I said in the first episode, her father really loved them too, and she's always drawn to animals that are fragile or sensitive, and I think she might understand the plight. And at this time, going on in FCW, AJ decided to move her sister out to Florida. She says she moved her out after Erica may or may not have burned an ex's house down. Oh my God, Erica. I hope the statute of limitations is up because I'm not trying to fuck up her situation. As money became less of a constant issue for AJ, she less and less worried about food insecurity as she had her whole fucking life, which is just sad because food should be free. But I'm happy that she and Erica got to experience that time together, and AJ got to fill a little bit of that loneliness with Nacho Cheese and with Erica. And I'm happy that they could have enough money to support themselves finally, because they had obviously been in a cycle of, food insecurities, and the only thing that got them out was money, which is just shitty because I think the government should be helping us with that. But I guess I'll stop now. But around this time, AJ was being asked to go on the road sometimes as little experiments. But women's roles in the WWE at this time, 2009, 2010, they weren't really in the ring except for when they would be the host for the night. So AJ would sometimes be encouraged to go get a dress and heels so she could go out to the crowd before the televised event started. You would usually ask like a kid a trivia question, which they still do. And AJ had a super awkward encounter with some kids this one night, and she kind of shit the bed. And when she went backstage, though, the comment from creative and the higher ups was, "Have you thought about repackaging your appearance? You kind of look matronly." A good point she made about this was like, shit, I just genuinely did very bad. Something you could criticize, but you're still making a comment on the way she looks. So apparently, Tom Pritchard said he didn't think it was right of one of them to say it, but AJ needed to be more sexy if she wanted to live up to the expectations they had for her. Which is one of the most evergreen, continuous fucking topics on this show. Women not displaying the right type of femininity for the machine operating around her. She said, quote, "I host on house shows. A woman's purpose was to look stunning and act fun and flirty so the audience would remain entertained in between matches, and I couldn't do either." She wasn't invited further on tour after that. She emphasizes that she was not the correct ingredient for the formula that they quote-unquote perfected when it came to women in the business. She fell into a category that many other women have also fallen into the past before. Luna, Natty, China, Awesome Kong, Jazz. But in the same way that those women did, AJ knew how to command a ring. And for some reason, the wrestling company that surrounded them did not see value in that. But AJ's opportunity was coming. AJ says when she was brought back on the road for another go, she did that hosting thing again and then sat to watch the women's match afterwards, which she did every time. But this time it went very badly. Like it was a bad match. And she said, quote, "I know how hard females in the industry work to be respected. When a match does not go well, it hurts all of us. Mostly because the decision makers felt it was only proving the point that a woman's time in the ring should be limited," unquote. She said she just felt really sorry for the women in the ring because she knew how difficult it was to be taken seriously by these people around them. And apparently, while she was watching this, out there in front of the audience, backstage, one of the top guys, who ended up being CM Punk, was watching the women's match. And while he threw his water bottle at the monitor, which is a weird story, especially with the most recent info we have about him, and said, quote, "Get some real women wrestlers out there," unquote. Which, like, you're such a dick. Whatever. Fit Finlay, a women's wrestling champion, apparently told AJ hopefully she had her ring gear because she was going to be on the next night. And she was. Her first match was with Layla, who was playing the heel at the time, and she really let AJ shine, she says, which she's always been really grateful for. They had chemistry, and the match went really well. And when they went backstage, everyone congratulated them, and even guys who had been shitty to her before. And after being told how well it really went, they started saying they were going to write her into the script next week. Or, no, we're going to write you into the script the week after that. Or, no, we're going to do it the week after that. But it never materialized. A few months later, FCW was getting a reality show, an NXT competition series. And although the opportunity to be, in front of the fans in a different way was a great opportunity for her, she was also kind of fucking frustrated for being told that to succeed, she would have to compete even again for something that was already being dangled in front of her. But about her and her competitors, AJ said, quote, "We would get the chance to show that what we could really do in the ring, that we were capable and strong women, that we were here to take our spot and be respected." But oh so predictably, the challenges they were given were of the absurd variety. Chocolate eating contests, limbo contests, present unwrapping contests, which what the fuck is that even? And of course, obviously, naturally, a dance-off for this wrestling competition. And she said about it, quote, "It's possible we weren't being taken too seriously." But AJ wanted to try to rise to each contest and proved during any WWE trivia moment, like just how much she loved this business, just how much she knew about it. She was trying to offer the fans a different option to the archetypes that had been like allowed to become characters within the WWE. Fans had never been provided someone like her, a character like her. She realized that many of the higher ups in the company, who were men, were pressing on the other female talent to be concerned with impressing and appealing to the male fans. But AJ wanted to appeal to the women and girl fans that she knew very well were out there and feeling neglected because nothing was really made for them in mind. And even though she was being told she was getting the fan votes every week for this NXT competition show, she was called into a higher-up's office and he asked her whether or not she thought she fit into the diva brand. And she said, quote, "Well, honestly, I'm not trying to fit in, but I think that's working for me. You guys have told me I got the most fan votes a week ago, so I think that means they're connected to the message I'm trying to send." And when he asked her what that message was, she said, quote, "That wrestling matters. There are a dozen gorgeous women out here to choose from if you're looking to put someone on a poster. So why not focus on wrestling skills and personality? Half our audiences are women. I think they want someone to represent them. And also, I think they really like my shoes." She emphasizes the reason that she started watching wrestling as a young girl, and it was because the wrestlers reminded her of the video games that she loved. They were all representing something more to her than just their physical outputs. So it makes sense why she was so attracted to this side of it all. Being on the NXT competition series really showed AJ just how little the executives were investing in the women's side of this competition. For the 6 women competing, the dressing room provided to them varied from a tarp covering the floor at the bottom of a staircase to a handicap bathroom stall or into a closet. Women really weren't being promoted in any meaningful way at the WWE at the time on top of that. The only time you would see a woman was maybe as a valet or in the opening credits. She was giving the fans a different option. AJ was. Quote, "It wasn't only a risk to go against the grain so hard. It was a bit disrespectful to so outwardly combat the conventional system. I understood I was probably pissing off my bosses, but I felt for the women who were so amazingly talented but were regulated to roles that focused on their looks and utilized them as glorified props. Damn." And she says not only was she recognizing that, she says the fans were fucking tired of women's wrestling that didn't take itself seriously. And her being authentically who she was in real life was really showing through. As she advanced in the competition with her fan base that was growing and growing, and her wrestling skills were doing the same, she was approached by someone in talent relations with some great, amazing, perfect advice in huge quotes. You can tell I'm just dripping with sarcasm. They said, "Look, we know you can wrestle, and not many women can. We appreciate that. We just want you to understand that it's important to be the full package. Right now, you're the best wrestler in the competition. Our female fans want to dress like you. Our male fans want to hang out with you and play video games with you. But no one wants to have sex with you. Do you see how that's a problem for us? I don't know how they do things in FCW, but here we have a standard our women are proud to look up to." It's hilarious. Within telling us this story, she looks at all of us as the audience reading the book and says, "Okay, should I wait until I get home or should I just start crying right here?" She said, quote, "After all my hard work and actual tangible success, taking a different route, everything still came down to how fuckable I was." Oh. Women's bodies are commodified in different ways than men's. I doubt with my full chest any male wrestler, if they were actually good, interesting, magnetic, everything AJ is, would ever be spoken to like that, about something like that. The women's matches were viewed with frivolity. They were meant to serve as a break from the action. AJ explains how this was a true, accepted strategy for entertaining the fans. The match was for a piss break. If the WWE was a satanic cult, the women's match of the night would usually be the sacrificial virgin. They would usually cut it out if any match went over, which they usually almost did. But no surprise, but AJ was kicked off the competition right after this conversation. But she wasn't kicked off without having the last word be hers. She said to the whole audience, quote, "I know I'm not a supermodel. I know I'm the girl that didn't go to prom and stayed home to play video games, but I think that's the girl you guys are ready to have as a diva. I think it's time that a diva represents every single girl in the audience watching, a girl that every single guy would want to hang out with. I have wanted this my entire life, and I have fought to get here. Every step I take has been for this moment to be in this ring. There is not one thing that is going to stop me. I will be back, and I am going to accomplish all of my dreams. Thank you so much for every single second. You will see me again." Going back to FCW, AJ became the first woman in the developmental division to become the queen of FCW and the FCW Divas Champion. 6 more months passed like this until the uppers decided again she was coming out on the road, and she was sure this was going to be her last hurrah. After everything that happened, I imagine she didn't think they had any space for women that were like her and for wrestlers that were like her. But she was surprised with this run because the women that she was paired with were all incredibly hard workers and good wrestlers. She was with the wrestler known as Caitlyn, whose real name is Celeste, who would become one of AJ's best friends. She was paired with Layla, and she was paired with Beth Phoenix. She told the girls straight out that she thought that this was going to be her last chance, basically. So they were like, "Okay, let's take it all the way then." And these matches made a big difference. There was very positive feedback. And she finally got her first debut on live television in May of 2011. She and her best friend Celeste got to debut together as a tag team, which is very sweet. After this, she was still classically the utility person they labeled her as, and she made her way through NXT, Main Event, which is a different show, and SmackDown at the time. She had a squash match with Beth Phoenix, the champion, the Glamazon, and definitely a future subject for this show, where AJ just got pummeled into the mat by Beth. Afterwards, Beth didn't realize AJ could hear, but Beth had pulled aside the new head of talent relations and said, quote, "That was her third match in one night, and they were all really great matches. I hope I'm not the only one that noticed that." She and these women were creating a different locker room environment than had been given to them before or seen before. AJ said there was no infighting because they saw the larger picture. They saw that banding together was making each other look good, and in turn, it made them all look good. She was really grateful to Beth for saying that because she didn't think she had to stick her neck out for anybody, but she did. So, as AJ is kind of finding her spot within this televised wrestling thing, when it comes to storylines in the WWE, there is usually one that's like the most important, the main card, and then there's like mid card storylines, middling stories that don't really have much weight to them. And because AJ wasn't a top billed person, she was paired with another not top billed person, Daniel Bryan, who is also known as Bryan Danielson. And at that time, he had a similar vibe to AJ. They were both dedicated wrestling fans, kind of nerdy, a little small, and just brutally underestimated by the people who were in control in this company. Because we all know Daniel is Bryan Danielson. And through a turn of events, basically kind of outside of their control, the storyline between the two of them became top billed. So she had this working relationship with Bryan Danielson, but AJ was also dealing with really weird backstage shit with the men around her. She said about that, quote, "If you're not going to put out in your first few months of the job, at the very least, a lot of men expect you to stroke their ego and flirt. Giggling at unfunny jokes, having boob-to-chest contact hugs, and laughing off blatant workplace sexual harassment are considered prerequisites of the women in the minds of many ignorant men." And because of that, there were some coworkers that she despised for these reasons, but there were also some helpful ones. The world's strongest man, Mark Henry, once saw a crew member ogling AJ as she was stretching backstage, and because of it, he lifted him clear off his feet and pinned him against the wall, asking if he thought that that was okay. When AJ was starting to work 5 days a week for the company, she and her female cohorts were getting a lot of unwanted attention from men, and she spends ample time in the book discussing the reasons with which men make women feel unsafe in the society we have constructed. She tells a story of a man tailing her while she ran errands, all the way to the stadium she was performing at. The part of her career that dips its toes into the salaciousness of life, and I think being a woman athlete in general, provides what she refers to as, quote, "an expectation of access." She has had men follow her through dark parking lots begging for a photo. She's had two men plan a sexual assault on her while using a child as bait during a photo op. She had two other men follow her over 2 state lines as she was driving alone at night, and they followed her to her same motel and got a room next to hers because when she opened her door the next morning, they were like, "Can we get an autograph?" Like, as quickly as possible. Once a guy wouldn't stop calling her hotel room, asking her to go get drinks with him. And when she finally was like, "I'm going to call the front desk," she was asking them to please block these calls to her room from this person. And wouldn't you know it, she found out it was the manager that was calling all along. A wrestler friend of AJ's had one of the staff at a motel try to use a master key to get into her room at night. Because she bolted the door, she just made terrible eye contact with him. It's really scary. And all of this happening, on a different note, when it came to AJ, men kind of freaked her out for a lot of good reasons. And dating outside of that had never really interested her as a girl or as a teenager. And she says, quote, "When it came to romance, I was less a giggling schoolgirl and more a jaded divorcee in grade school." I just picture like a 9-year-old smoking a cigarette with a coffee in her hand and her hair up in a bun, and she's just really busy. She's got to get to work. AJ had a tumultuous home life, and romance seemed to make things more difficult. She knew her parents really loved each other, but, quote, looking at the heartache my parents caused each other, I didn't think I wanted any part of what I knew marriage to be. She says she always didn't think she would ever get married. And something that is so like, I have gone to therapy, hear me roar. She says, quote, I had been taught love and tenderness was dependent on my behavior and on what I could provide. I just didn't trust in the idea that anyone would love me forever. That sounded like a hell of a long time. AJ's first boyfriend, though, was another wrestler named Greg, who seemed overall very sweet to her. And as she got busier in the company, she started finding herself drifting from him. But when he broke up with her, she was still heartbroken. She dated other wrestlers for the good and for the bad, and started to have these very real relationships for the first time in her life. And while all of this is going down, she's still paired with Daniel Bryan on screen. It was 2011, and he had just won the World Heavyweight Championship, which is like the championship when it comes to WWE. Their story, like her dating life, was going through its tribulations. She said, quote, it was easy to play a heartbroken mess with an unrequited love when I spent each night crying into my hair over being dumped. What astonished me was how therapeutic it was to show my raw emotions on screen under the guise of performance. I twisted my real-life heartbreak into the broken character, and it was thrilling to blur the lines between the two. In the world of make-believe and escapism, people want to vicariously express themselves through you. Her honesty and the raw emotion becomes palpable on screen. And now she was in this main event storyline, and that was only 2 months after, as AJ puts it, quote, I was told no one wanted to take me behind the school and get me pregnant. So she didn't want to fuck up her chance, but this company is still the same company that gave her that note 2 months ago. So another fucked up thing happened, of course. She and Brian's storyline was drifting into, still unrequited love, and AJ was giving vengeful ex-girlfriend as a character. And now they wanted her to veer into a different place, which was like crazy ex-girlfriend territory, which didn't sound too bad for her until they told her one of their ideas, which was her as this loopy ass, like head in the clouds crazy girl that was going to dance with dinosaurs from outer space and kiss a leprechaun? Like, are they talking about Hornswoggle? I'm so confused. It felt kind of icky to her, like to be representing this absolutely bonkers character, being called a crazy ex-girlfriend. And she says, quote, we were going to make a joke out of mental illness. Sure, WWE wasn't an after-school special, but after everything I had gone through, not only with my mother, but myself, mocking an affliction that deeply affected me was not something I was interested in. She says she was nervous to express this and to get this out, and she knew that as a newbie, and as a newbie that was a woman, quote, everyone assumed I should just be grateful to be used in something other than a 30-second 10-women tag match. Ooh. But she had a different angle to try. She says that she never says no without offering up another option. So she said she wanted to take that character and tweak it a little bit into a darker side. Something that felt less exploitative and was her choice, which I respect. She says, quote, I suggested instead of making the character a caricature of a mentally ill person, why not explore how dangerous that illness could make her? Which is way more fun. They are lucky they hired people like her who can save them from embarrassment of dancing with dinosaurs and fucking kissing leprechauns. When AJ suggested it, they threw her off TV for 2 months. Little bitches. But when it worked for them, they brought her back, and they decided they wanted to try it out. When she got her chance to play the character she pitched, she wondered, quote, if I didn't want her to be a joke, then what did I want her to be? She said, quote, I was asked to be the face of a proper quote-unquote crazy, and now it was my responsibility to do it right. She took the pieces of herself she knew very well and created a maniacal Alex from Fatal Attraction type woman. Through this storyline she carried with Brian, CM Punk, and Kane, she got so many opportunities that she created for herself, mind you. Quote, I made it into my first of 3 video games and had not one but 6 action figures made in my likeness. I was the first woman to open and close the company's flagship television show, and I became one of the only handful of women in the company's history to wrestle at the show's main event. Not bad for someone so unfuckable. Ooh, yes, AJ. So, the storyline with one of those men, CM Punk, became what we know now is their marriage. Before that, he had told her when she started to let him know if anyone was fucking with her and that he would help her out. And when he was a judge on the NXT competition show, he would, I guess, only say nice things about her and would, quote, ruthlessly mock the rest of the girls. I read this book years ago, and when I reread it for this, I saw that I wrote ew next to that in huge letters, because that's weird. Don't knock down other women to help this one woman you find attractive and interesting. Whatever. They did have a lot in common, though. They both had a bipolar parent. They both came from chaotic homes. They both had pulled themselves up through wrestling. And after having to kiss both Punk and Brian in a scene, she and CM Punk were like, oh shit, we like each other. And when you look up this video on YouTube, you can see it, and it's kind of cute. It brings a smile to your face. As her career kept moving forward, she was making the best out of these 3-minute matches that women were receiving still. She was aware that she got so much screen time because of the men that she was with. It wasn't because of her. She was placed with them, so that's why she got so much attention. But when she was working with the women, she said, quote, because so little of attention was being paid to the women's division, we were accidentally given a lot of creative control. And the stories that, she and Celeste, Caitlin, were kind of pumping out ended up really successful. One of the stories they put together ended up being the most viewed video that the WWE had ever had on YouTube, and the stories that they were pumping out were good. And this all kind of led to AJ being only one of 3 women at that time to be given merchandise. The last was a decade before AJ arrived, and when she pitched any merch to her higher-ups when she started, they said, quote, women don't sell, and laughed in unison when she said that she would have merch. And then directly after she broke that 10-year gap, I guess, in women's merchandise, Celeste, Caitlin, also got merchandise, which is very exciting for them. So while the men in the industry maybe weren't still helping her as much as she needed, she was creating a space, paving a way for her and for her coworkers. She wasn't forgetting about them. It wasn't just about her. It was about a lot more. And as we come to the end, I want to have AJ, in her own words, share a sweet story. It's a little full circle.
When I was 16, 17, I went to WrestleMania 20 with my dad, and we had nosebleed seats. I looked over at my dad, and my dad had tears in his eyes, and we could barely see the ring, and I looked at him, and I said, why are you crying? And he said, I wish I could have afforded better seats for you. And I just looked at him, and I was like, don't worry about it. I'm going to be in that ring one day. And 10 years later, at WrestleMania 30, I walked in and out as the champion.
Which is just the sweetest thing that you could even imagine. I know, right? Her and CM Punk got married on a Friday the 13th, and they seem happy together, I guess. Lately, AJ is a executive producer and a color commentator for the Women of Wrestling, WOW, which is based in Los Angeles, nearby where I am. And she's just continuing the process of creating something better for those after her. She is, of course, still navigating life as a person who has bipolar disorder, just happens to. And she says about it, quote, "Society taught me mental illness was a burden to be carried solemnly and, more important, quietly." But why? She asks. She became successful in spite of the things she was told would only hold her back. Her size, her fire, her mental illness, her strife. I want to let AJ have the last word on herself. Changing society's perception of the word is not going to happen overnight. Crazy. But I've changed minds before. It took a lifetime to get here, but I know that there are still miles to go before I sleep. This time I will reach farther. This time I will dream bigger. I'm going to change the world. But first, I'd like a nap. Thank you for listening so much. This was Queen of the Ring, which is written, created, and produced by me, Alexa Pruitt. The music is by Kreider Dane at Helter Skelter Music Productions. And I hope you'll join us again. Thank you so much.